Hi everybody, welcome back. Good afternoon. I appreciate you coming back, or I guess whatever time it is that you have me watching this. For me right now, it's afternoon. So you may recognize this little project here. This is our shed project that we were working on for the last few videos here. Now in our previous video, we slapped a roof on this guy, and as you can see, it's got some color on it now. So in today's video, we're gonna finish this out. We're gonna trim it out, we're gonna prep it for paint, we're obviously gonna paint it. I'm gonna make a couple tweaks to the door that I mentioned in a previous video, and I'm also gonna show you some shelves that I built on the inside using pretty much nothing but scraps. Check it out. Alright, now these are the shelves that I built for the shed. Now, if you guys remember out by that tree out in front of the shed when we were building the walls, I had a whole bunch of scrap 2x4 pieces that were all cut-offs. Those are basically what I built this entire thing out of. The OSB is also cut-offs from the wall and the roof, things like that. So literally everything except this board and this board here was all scraps. So I had two 2x4s. Beyond that, everything else I made in here was scraps. So it's kind of partially married to the size of the scraps that I had because I didn't want to buy any more wood because I already bought enough, and wood is insanely expensive right now. So the overall size of these two shelves are 67 inches long and 29.5 inches tall to the top of the OSB. This leg and this leg are 29 inches tall overall, and I was married to the length just based on the amount of OSB I had, but also because I was stopping at that stud right there in the wall. The length of the 2x4s though gave me just enough material to come back about an inch into this stud right here and fasten them to the wall from the back side. So I started with the bottom shelf first, and for obvious reasons. I came out to this stud here, like I said, along the back wall. Now, I did come out 20 inches all total. So this board right here is actually 18.5 inches. So I came off the front of the stud and I just toe-nailed a couple of screws from the bottom and the top in at a 45-degree angle to hold it to the stud. And then I literally just made a box right here and attached my leg with one screw here and a couple screws here into the leg. And that solidified this corner, took this 2x4 back to that stud like I said before, and now I had my basic box. The thing is, out here in the middle of the shelf, I didn't have any support yet. So what did I do on that? I attached cleats. Now you can kind of get an idea though of how this all went together. So I toe-nailed that one in, like I said, to the stud. So this one I got into two studs. It's a little bit more solid there, but a couple of face screws into it. And this one here, I literally just toe-nailed again from the side, top, bottom, everywhere I had an opportunity to, straight into the wall stud. And then this guy here, just two face screws into the stud again. And then same thing on this guy here. I did a toenail screw into the back walls, or to the side wall stud, face screwed into the back wall stud, and then literally just tied into the 2x4 right there. So it's actually extremely sturdy, but because it was all just little scrap boards, it's shelving inside a shed. It doesn't have to have a full 2x4 all the way across. This is plenty strong. And it's on the bottom side. Nobody's going to see it anyway. So it looks fantastic. It works. That's the best part about it. I literally got two identical shelves and all I used was two 2x4s. Can't argue with that. Now, way back in the before times of last fall when the shed originally went up to begin with, you've probably already seen us start attaching some trim if you've been following this build along. Now we used 5/4 by 6 pressure treated deck boards for the fascia along the roof and some more 5/4 by 6 deck boards that I had ripped in half as the trim around the door. Now we can start making the trim for the rest of the shed. So I've got a couple of 10-foot long 5/4 deck boards and an 8-foot long 5/4 deck board. Now these I'm ripping purely in half with my circular saw at 2 3/4 inches. And they're going to make up the trim along the front and back of the shed along the roof and the ground, as well as the sides of the shed along the ground. I've also got a few more 8-foot boards that I'm ripping down to 1 3/4 by 3 3/4 inches. Now these are going to make an L that I'm going to use to cap the corners of the shed. But this way, once they're L'd up and screwed together, they're going to measure 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. Alright, now I know this is upside down, but bear with me. So for those of you who've never used a circular saw before or may not have looked that closely at it, how I figured out where I'm supposed to rip my boards at, if you look here on the front of my fence, there's actually marks on your circular saw, and that's measurement marks. So here in line with my 0-degree mark, because my blade is perfectly up and down, I'm literally taking, and in 1/4 inch measurements, they go all the way across. 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inches, and 5 inches. So I've literally come over to my 2 3/4 inch mark. I've lined that up with the edge of my 5/4 board, and I know when I rip it in half that I'm literally ripping it pretty much straight down the center. And then when I need to make my shortcuts, I literally line up the edge of my 1 3/4 inch mark with the edge of my 5/4 deck board, and I rip those off, just as simple as that. Now here's hoping you didn't throw away that template that we used to cut the angles on our roof rafters in the last video, because you're going to need it to cut the angles on some of our trim here, because it's going to be sliding up underneath the fascia boards along the sides of the shed. Now these can honestly be a little bit tricky to make, and I would suggest honestly just holding them up and visualizing them in place, marking your angles and your cuts and taking them back off and then making them on the bench, because it's really easy to get turned around making these things. One of them is going to be longer because it's going to fit up underneath the soffit on the front and back, and the one's going to have an angle on it because it's going to be fitting underneath the fascia boards along the sides. So it can get a little tricky. Once you have all that figured out, you can assemble it. Now I'm just using some 2.5 inch screws here all the way up. I flush the bottom up first because I know that is going to be square and the tops are going to be different angles. I would, however, suggest running a bead of glue along that seam just for a little bit tighter hold, but also better weatherproofing over time. But as you can see here, once they're in place, they fit up nice, perfectly and snug, and then I just attached it with some 2.5 inch screws. Now you don't have to worry about missing any wood back there. There's studs in the corners, as well as along the top and the bottom. We got our top and bottom plates, so you can just drive the screws right through there and attach everything. One thing you'll also notice is when I made all of my side corner caps, all of my seams where the 3 3/4 and the 1 3/4 inch board join together are all facing sideways. And that's so when you're looking at the face of the shed, you're not looking at a seam staring you right along the corner. Everything just has the nice wide board facing you. Once all of our trim is done, we need to start prepping this guy out for paint, and we're going to use a sealant to do that. Now I've got an acrylic latex caulking sealant here. It's made for windows and door frames, and it's paintable and exterior rated. Now there's different kinds of sealants you can use. You can use polyurethane, but in my area they're about 3 times the price, and this will work absolutely fine. We want to make sure to apply our sealant everywhere there's a gap between our pressure treated boards and our OSB. So along the top, the sides, the bottom, obviously the bottom, and especially between the seams where we've got 2 sheets of OSB. Now I've cut my caulking to about 1/4 inch here, and I'm just pushing it in as I'm squeezing it out, and that's just forcing it into the gap. Then I'm going to come back and just wipe it off with my finger just to A, smooth it out, but B, also just to push it in a little bit farther. I'm not pushing excessively hard. I'm just pressing it into this gap until it's smoothed right out. You don't have to worry about making this look like $1,000,000 because once it's covered in paint, you're never going to see where there was caulk to begin with. Caulking between the OSB sheets is kind of annoying only because OSB is rough, but again, it doesn't have to be $1,000,000. We're just going for a smooth transition between the 2 sheets and filling the gaps so no water can get in there. So just apply it and then wipe it off with your finger, and that is good. Once it's painted, you'll never know anyway. Then we're going to remove the door and get it out of the way so we can take the hinges off, A, for a better paint job, but B, because I'm going to upgrade it to 4 hinges like I mentioned when we put the door on to begin with. You'll notice too, I'm not applying any caulking between the top of my trim board and my soffit, and that is honestly just A, because it's not necessary. Water's not going to go all the way underneath that, but B, because it's just going to leave a little bit of an air gap for the shed to breathe. I also made sure to apply some caulking to the top of the trim above the door because that's the place where water is obviously going to sit. And I'm also applying some along the inside of the door frame between the OSB and the pressure treated wood. Again, just for a little bit better seal in case a driving rain and some high winds want to just sort of swirl the water around right there. It's not going to seep in behind on that side of it too. Now we can make this baby shine, make it finally look pretty. So I'm using a graphite gray here on all of the walls and an off-white for all of the trim. Once the gray was applied, I left it overnight to get good and dry so that way the next morning I could mask up for the white, knowing full well that my painter's tape would not risk damaging the gray underneath. Okay, so the paint on the shed is almost dry, and I just wanted to take a quick sec here to talk about a couple things. One, I didn't prime this guy. Could you? Absolutely. Now, I used an exterior paint and primer in one combo. The benefit to that is the paint primer combo covers up the factory branding marks and stuff like that on the OSB, all the tattoos and stuff that are on it in manufacturing. But the paint primer one combos don't really hide like wood texture and grain all that well. But for myself, that was absolutely fine because this is about the finish I wanted anyway. Could you prime it? Absolutely. If you want to prime it, go ahead, slap some primer on there, and you're going to get a much smoother finish overall, but there is obviously extra cost in that. Now, I know I sprayed this guy. Don't yell at me. I have the sprayer. I had the ability to. Save me a lot of time. Now, I did have to mask the whole thing up when I switched colors, but it was a minor inconvenience. Well worth it. Could you roll this guy out and brush it? Absolutely. Couple things. If you were going to roll the large panels on the sides of the walls, things like that, I would use something like this guy here. Now this is a 20 mil nap roller. In other words, it's big and fluffy. Now this is really good on uneven surfaces, and OSB is notoriously uneven and kind of rough. This will just give you a better finish a lot faster. On the white trim, what I would do is I would just stick with a normal little 4-inch roller like this with a 10 mil nap. Because the wood is actually going to be a lot smoother, 10 mil nap is fine. And then I would also take about a 2.5-inch wide tapered brush like this for doing your detail work. Now, like I said, I had to mask the whole thing up because I sprayed it, but if you were going to brush and roll this guy, I would still do a little bit of masking, but you don't necessarily need the paper. So I would still take probably 1.5 to 2-inch wide painter's tape, and I would still run it along all of my edges here and tape all this stuff off. The reason being is if you're getting real slap happy with your brush and you get in there, it's not going to go overboard on you. But if you take your roller, you can actually run your roller up along there and push it right against the painter's tape, and the painter's tape will block the white from going onto the gray. I know there's going to be a few people that are going to ask me about this thing here, how it works and what is it. So this is basically just this blue thing with this black attachment here. That's all it is that you buy. You can set it up with whatever painter's tape you have and whatever masking paper you buy. So you can get 6, 9, and 12-inch masking paper. Then you can get all different sizes of painter's tape, down to really thin all the way to really thick. It can accommodate for it just by sliding the attachment for the blade. The blade can go down from 6 inches all the way up to 12 inches. And it just, as you draw the paper out, you just stick the tape to it, and then the tape just keeps reapplying to the paper as you draw it out. You saw me doing it. It works pretty well. I had a couple of hiccups, but it's honestly the first time I've actually used one of these. I've wanted one for a long time. But overall, I think it worked great, so I was pretty happy with it. If you guys want something like this, I'll have it linked down below. But for now, I'm anxious to get this masking tape pulled off and see what we got. Alright, so I'm putting my hinges back in the door here, and I'm taking a quick second to upgrade to 4 hinges here, just like I had mentioned in the door video when I first hung it on the shed. Like I said, it hadn't really started to sag or move yet, but in my opinion, it's better overkill than underkill, and I'm gonna take this chance to upgrade my hinges. I've also changed them over to black from the galvanized steel that I had, and I do have these linked down below in the original door video and in this video as well, so if you want them, go check them out. And I have a latch mechanism to match that's also black. Now if you're wondering how to space these out, I have 7 inches on the bottom and the top from obviously the ends to the start of my hinge, and then from here to figure out your dimensions I have 16.5 inches between each hinge. But if you're ever wondering how to space things out evenly, take your dimension, in my case I had 57.5 inches, subtract the size of whatever it is you have. So I have 2 hinges at 4 inches each, so I took 8 inches off of that, left me with 49.5, and then you literally just divide that by 3, and that gives you 16.5 in my case, 16.5 inches, equal measurement between each hinge, and that's my spacing. Also, I'm not using the tiny little short screws that came in the package because these will not hold up the weight of this door. So what I took the opportunity to do was I took the 2.5 inch long treated screws for pressure treated wood that I had before that I actually took out, and then I obviously grabbed a few more because I have an extra hinge now, and I literally just stuck them in some cardboard and I painted them matte black with a rattle can, and that's it. That way I have screws that are long enough to hold the weight of the door, but I still have black ones that match my hinges. I had to downgrade some of my screws because I ran out of 2.5s. I figure with an extra hinge, I should be good with a couple 1.5 inch screws in here, but oh well. To reset the gaps on the door, I've literally got a small piece of 1/4 inch plywood on the floor of the shed that I'm going to pick the door up and rest it on. That's going to pick it up the exact 1/4 that I need and leave me a 1/4 between the top and the bottom. Then I'm going to rest it against the door stop that I've got inside there, and that sets my depth. Then we've got another small piece of 1/4 inch plywood that we're going to rest along the far side opposite of the hinges to give me a 1/4 inch reveal over there. I'm going to attach that hinge. Slide the shim down to the bottom and attach that hinge, and this just squares the door up in the hole, and then just attach the rest of the hinges. Well guys, and that is it. That's all she wrote for the shed. It is up, it's standing, it's beautiful, and it's all complete, ready to throw all your junk inside. So I really hope you guys honestly enjoyed this shed series video. Thank you so much for watching. It means everything to me. I super appreciate it. But if you guys build something like this, I mean, if you guys build any of my projects for that matter, but if you guys especially build this shed, hit me up, let me know how it's going along. If you guys have any questions, shoot me an email. Whatever you need, hit me up in the comments section. I will always reply. If you guys build it, I'd love to see pictures of it. Again, send me an email with some pics, tag me on Insta, whatever you want to do. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, you guys. I appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks very much.